Like the hat? Oysters. Few foods generate such passion, devotion, and downright revulsion. If you're a fan, there's nothing finer than slurping down one plucked fresh from the sea, all on a half shell. Nice, huh? If you're not a fan, however, the oyster is at best a mystery. And at worst, it's a slimy mud slug enjoyed only by Epicurean Evel Knievels. Ugh. Okay, I don't doubt that the first oyster was downed on a dare, but I do feel certain that the second, third, fourth, and everyone since has gone down with a smile. Because whether raw or cooked, oysters deliver the goodness of the sea like no other critter can. So stick around, won't you? Because we're going to arm you with the tools and know-how required to turn these humble bivalves into seriously Although oysters appear to be the hottest thing on two plates these days, the oyster fad is actually a little bit of history repeating. The Greeks were so crazy about oysters, they used oyster shells as ballots in their many elections. The Romans were big fans, as were the Chinese, who preferred their oysters dried. Ancient Americans, big oyster fans. They have giant mounds of oyster shells all along the coasts of America. 19th century Americans, now there were some oyster crazy people. They couldn't get enough of them. In the 1860s, New York oysters were plump and plentiful and routinely outsold anything at the butcher's counter. Served in bars for a penny a dozen and from street vendors as fast food, oysters were in those days at least considered food for the poor. In fact, Dickens wrote in the Pickwick Papers that poverty and oysters always seem to go together.
Good afternoon, sir. Care for an oyster?
Oh, gee, I don't know.
Nothing to be afraid of, sir. Just close your eyes and give it a slurp.
Well, I'm not afraid. I've got a little problem.
Say no more, sir. A dozen of these and it'll put the fire back in your britches, I assure you.
And I assure you there's nothing wrong with the fire in my britches.
It looks like the Nile's not just the river in Africa.
The problem is not with my pants, it's with your sanitation.
Are you calling me crazy?
No, but you would have to be crazy to eat oysters that have been sitting out in the sun all day. You know, it's a wonder that anybody lived to see the 20th century.
Not nice calling people crazy.
No, you're right. Here.
Now you want to buy an oyster.
No, now I want you to buy a bag of ice. I mean, since they're alive, when you buy them in the show, you've got to be even more careful with handling oysters than you would any other kind of seafood. And that means finding a reliable vendor.
No, I'm unreliable.
Preferably one with a store of some kind. See you, Chuck.
See you, Mr. B.
Once you've found yourself a reliable vendor, you may have some rather intimidating choices to make. But don't fear. Almost all of the oysters in that cabinet are the same variety. How could that be? Well, because oysters are a lot like coffee beans. Now, fine coffee beans, whether they're grown in Colombia, Guatemala, or Ethiopia, are almost always Arabica, okay? They're the same variety. They just taste different and are marketed differently because, well, they grow in different places. So they brew a cup with a different flavor. Well, it's the exact same thing with oysters. Where they grow determines how they taste and the name under which they're marketed. Now, the guy back here, my fishmonger, John Bowler, knows more than I could ever know about this stuff. So, John, give us a rundown on what you got in the case today.
Sure, Alden. Let's start off with the old reliable in this neck of the woods. This is a Apalachicola oyster. Here we move up to Long Island. This is a Blue Point.
Very famous.
Yep, full meated, very delicious.
Just comes from this one little part of Long Island Sound, right? Okay, so if somebody said to me, hey, I got some really great Boston Blue Points, they would be they'd be misleading me, lying. Next.
Yep. Let's go up to Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia.
Prince Edward Island, the Malapec oyster.
Malapec. Yep. Probably sweeter meat and not quite as large.
So far, all these oysters have one thing in common. They're all Atlantic or Eastern oysters.
Eastern oysters.
Like this one from Chincoteague Bay in Virginia. It's the Paramar oyster. Mildly salty with a distinct fruity flavor.
Wow. Big guy. Keep going.
Back to Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia.
So the Beau Soleil.
Beau Soleil. What does that mean?
It's nicknamed the Beautiful Sun, and it's got a sweet, mild taste.
Oh, Beau Soleil.
Kind of like the Malapec. Doesn't get very big.
Wow, that's a really pretty jewel of an oyster. Nice single bite there.
We got here some Emerald Cove from British Columbia, Canada. It's mildly salty.
And that is a very different looking oyster. It's got a very frilled lip on it.
Some of the western oysters will have a kind of a scalloped edge like that.
So if we were talking coffee beans here, we could say these were all Arabica, and this was the Robusto.
Good analogy.
Excellent. Now, since this is a different variety, different flavor?
A little bit different, yeah.
A little bit different. Do you see these very often here on the Atlantic where we live?
No.
Now, if we were in California, would we have a bunch of Pacific oysters lined up here and maybe just the blue points?
You have the opposite.
Okay, so it really depends on where you're living. Great. Now, you know a lot about oysters. Do you actually like them?
I love oysters.
How do you take them?
I personally like to have them raw, on the half shell, a little Tabasco, a little lemon, wash it down with a cold beer.
Outstanding.
I'm old-fashioned.
I'm going to take all of them.
I'm going to need a bigger bag.
Go get a bigger bag. He needs a bigger bag. To store your oysters, lay them out in flat layers in a container, okay? If you put them on their sides, oysters are sometimes tempted to open, and that'll make them spill their liquor, and they will go bad faster. Now, you don't have to put them on ice, but you do have to keep them refrigerated and covered with a nice moist cloth. And if you've got more than a couple of layers worth, you might want to slide another cloth in between somewhere. Now, kept this way, you should be able to keep your oysters alive for a week. Of course, I can't really imagine waiting that long to break into one. Speaking of breaking and entering, breaking into an oyster might be easier than breaking into a bank vault, but not by much. We could use high explosive. That would do the trick. Maybe overkill, though. We could always cut our way in. That would be efficient, but we might get shell shards in the oysters, and that certainly wouldn't be a good eat. Nope. I think we're going to have to rely on good old-fashioned leverage.
I'm Leverman!
Thank goodness you're here, Leverman. Tell us, what do you have for us?
I have a crowbar.
Crowbar? Okay, well, I tell you what. Why don't you go to work on that big door over there, and I'll go to work on these. Dummy, get down here.
What?
Did you bring the things I asked for?
Yes, and I actually brought what you need.
Like what?
Like this glove.
What kind of glove?
Not that. That won't work. Elasticized cotton with a rubberized palm. That'll help you grip the oyster and protect your hand.
Are you saying I need to get a grip?
I've been telling you that for years.
Knife.
Okay. Ergonomic non-slip handle. Sturdy blade. Slightly angled at the tip.
Oh, yeah. Look at that. Does size matter?
Despite what you've been told, yes. 2 3/4 inches is best.
2 3/4 inches. Great. Well then, the world is mine oyster, which I, with sword, will open.
Try not to mutilate that oyster the way you do Shakespeare, okay?
The lady doth protest too much, methinks.
Well, I am just getting started.
Yeah, well, I'm just getting started, too. I'm going to make sure the flat side is up so we don't lose any juice. Pop the knife in the hinge, give a little twist, and then just work the knife all the way around. I'm going to make sure to separate that adductor muscle from the top shell. Then, just scrape our way under. There. Got it!
Got it! Leverman rules!
The world's just not his oyster, is it?
He's not the sharpest lever in the drawer, you know?
Bye-bye!
Okay, here we go again. Make sure that the round part of the shell is down. And look, this one had some baby oysters riding on it. Work your knife into the hinge, and sometimes it works better facing up, sometimes down. And try to twist the oyster in the knife at the same time, just until you feel it pop. Don't try to pry it open all the way. Then work the knife around, jiggling it back and forth gently. Always press it up against the top of the shell to make sure you get that adductor muscle. There. Then just sweep right under the main part of the oyster to separate that other muscle. As you might imagine, raw oysters are best when served fresh, so save the shucking until right before service time. Now when it comes down to numbers, well, if you're going to serve this as an appetizer, I'd go 6 large or eastern oysters, 8 to 10 if you're dealing with the little Canadian guys. And if it's the only thing you plan on serving, well, sky's the limit. Now oyster aficionados often scoff at the idea of additives, but if you ask me, a squeeze of lemon, a little squirt of hot sauce, or a dab of horseradish is quite acceptable. What is not as acceptable is icky prepared horseradish. We're going to make our own. A member of the cabbage family and kin to mustards, turnips, and other radishes, horseradish gets its name via mispronunciation. You see, in German, it's called Meerrettich, or sea radish. Okay, the English came along, and they didn't read German any better than I speak it. So they just saw the mare, and they thought, oh, female horse. So they called it horseradish. Although roots 20 inches and longer are not rare, you won't need anything as horsey for this. Just a little dab. Go ahead, give it a try. You did like it, didn't you? Now, this will keep in the refrigerator, if tightly wrapped, 2 to 3 weeks. And don't worry, if it seems a little hot at first, that pungency will die down after a couple of days. Me, I like it full power. Traditional wisdom holds that one should not consume raw oysters in months without R's. That is, of course, summertime. The issue? Spawning. Summer is spawning season, and when an oyster's thoughts turn to love, well, the meat gets kind of milky and soft and yucky. Now, we've overcome this to some degree with the introduction of genetically modified oysters, which never spawn. Never spawn. What kind of fun is that? But there are some other reasons to avoid oysters in the raw state during the summer months.
Mr. Brown, are you familiar with Vibrio vulnificus?
You mean the bacteria that naturally occurs in some oysters in warm water during the summer months? Well, sure. It can cause sickness in some people and even death in people that have liver problems or immune system problems or cancer or diabetes. Generally speaking, Canadian and Pacific oysters are exempt, though, because Vibrio doesn't like cold water, and it can't survive cooking either.
Nor does it like acid. It rarely survives stomach acid, which is why if you plan on eating raw oysters, you should never take an antacid first. But luckily, Vibrio's fairly rare.
Well, that's good. That's good because oysters are low in fat, they're high in protein, they've got omega-3 fatty acids and minerals and zinc and...
Zinc increases testosterone production, you know.
Yeah? Say, Doc, is it true what they say about oysters being...
Aphrodisiacs? No. But if you're having some problems, I can write you a prescription for something.
So don't give up hope.
Oh, Bob. Although hardcore oyster heads may insist that raw is the only way to go, truth is, our favorite bivalve responds very well to heat. The trick is to not use too much heat. Now, take, for instance, a classic application like oysters Rockefeller, which was developed about 100 years ago by a New Orleans chef named Jules Alciatore. Now, old Jules decided to take that recipe to his grave, but I think that we've concocted a version of that dish that will placate the palates of even the richest of food snobs.
Well, let's just let me be the judge of that.
Step 1. Get down your biggest skillet. It does not have to be non-stick. Put that over medium-low heat. First thing into the pan, 6 tablespoons of unsalted butter. Now, why melt this over low heat when obviously high heat would be faster? Because there's water inside butter, right? And if that water expands faster than the fat melts, then it pops and explodes all over your lovely white shirt. And we don't want this. So be patient and let this melt properly. Now, time for the vegetation. We will begin with 3/4 of a cup of onion, finely chopped, and 3/4 of a cup of finely chopped celery. There we go. And stir to coat. We're also going to add some salt, about 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon. Now, this is not sautéing, okay? Sautéing would be over high heat, and the goal would be to brown the vegetables. All we want to do here is to soften them. So this is technically called a sweat. But I am going to turn the heat up just under medium. Now, why the salt? Because we want to pull as much water out of the vegetables as possible, and salt will certainly help to do that. Now, I know this looks like a lot of butter, but don't worry, it won't be so much by the time we're done. Let this go for about 5 minutes, stirring occasionally. Next load of software would include 1 tablespoon of finely minced garlic. That's about 4 medium cloves worth, okay? Straight in, and just stir that in. We're going to let this cook for about another minute, which is just enough time to work up the rest of the software. Time to wrap up this Rockefeller. Artichokes into the pan. And then immediately follow that with 1 cup of panko or Japanese breadcrumbs, 2 teaspoons of lemon zest, half a teaspoon of black pepper, 1 teaspoon of oregano, dried, please. And last but not least, just a little bit more salt. Now stir until the butter has been completely absorbed by the breadcrumbs. Then let it cook for about another minute over low heat. Spread 4 cups of rock salt on a sheet pan, preferably one with sides so you don't season your oven. Now you could use crumpled aluminum foil instead of the salt, but it wouldn't retain heat nearly as well. Carefully arrange your oysters on top, making sure that they're tilted so that the liquor won't pour out, and then cover each with a nice equal amount of the topping. Now you should have enough for 2 dozen oysters here. Now this is going to go into a 425-degree oven for 10 to 12 minutes. Now the topping will keep the oysters from drying out, but keep an eye on them just the same. And remember, that breading can go from golden brown and delicious to over-caramelized really fast. There we go. Golden, brown, and delicious. The really groovy thing is that the breading protected the oysters from the high heat of the oven. That means they didn't dry out, and that means that after you eat the oyster, you'll have a little spoonful of liquor to enjoy.
Where are those oysters?
I'm coming already. So?
By Jove, those oysters could certainly rock a fella.
So, a 5th serving then?
Oh, no, I'm stuffed. I couldn't hold another bite.
Oh, not even a wafer thin mint?
Well, if it's a wafer thin, yeah.
So far, we have seen how oysters act when they are raw and scantily clad, as well as cooked and covered. Now it's time to see how they play in a true team environment, as in when they are immersed in a soup. First thing we're going to need, oysters, of course. But for a soup, I like to use pre-shucked and packaged oysters. Okay, they're raw in here, and you can generally get these in pint, quart, and gallon containers. The flavor isn't going to be quite the same as freshly shucked, but it's darned close. To ensure quality, always look at the use-by date on here, and take a look at the liquor. It should be clear and not cloudy. Okay, that's going to provide the meat and the flavor base, but we're also going to use 1 quart, and that's 4 cups of cream. Yes, cream, and I've got really good reasons for it. 1, texture, which is going to be nice and smooth, and 2, flavor. You see, the fat will help to spread the subtle flavor of the oysters. I mean, come on, it's not like I'm asking you to drink a cup a day, okay? Also going to need 2 ribs of celery and a tablespoon of butter just to cook the vegetation. Start by draining the oysters so that their juice or liquor is captured in a large saucepan. Add the cream to that and bring the mixture slowly to a simmer over medium heat. In the meantime, put your largest skillet over medium heat and sweat the finely cut celery in butter with just a little bit of salt to help pull out the moisture. When that becomes aromatic, after a couple of minutes, ready to add 1 onion, finely chopped that is, and toss the coat with the butter. When the aromatics are soft and translucent, time to add the oysters and some celery seed, a teaspoon in fact. And last but not least, several good shots of hot sauce. Go as much as a teaspoon and a half here. There. When the oysters start to plump up and kind of frill around the edges, you know that they're done. But remember, we don't want to overcook them here. So, into the blender. A blender will definitely give you a smoother soup, but if you don't have a blender, you can certainly get away with your food processor. There we go. Now, let's get some cream. Now, if we added all the cream to the oysters at once, we'd never be able to get it all into the blender. So I'm just going to add enough to come up right to the top level of the oysters. There. A couple of ladles to do the trick. Put on the lid and puree on medium to medium-high speed, depending on your blender, until the oysters are completely obliterated. We're looking for a very smooth puree here. Then return the cream to medium heat and add the puree back in. Perfect. Finish with a squirt of lemon juice and sprinkle in some fresh herbs. Parsley, chervil, or chives are nice. And enjoy. I hope that we've given you oyster lovers a few tips to help you get more pleasure out of your bivalve experience. And if you've never tried oysters, well, then I hope we've given you the courage to come out of your culinary shell and give these versatile mollusks a chance to become truly good eats. See you next time. I'll get to you next.